The Treaty of Versailles is often regarded as the root problem leading to the start of World War II, as it gave rise to many difficulties in Europe. But today, we will provide some background to how this one treaty could possibly lead the world to war by answering this question. To what extent were Italian fascism and German Nazism a consequence of the Treaty of Versailles? So let's answer this question in two separate parts. First, we will talk about Italian fascism and how much of its rise was resulting from the Treaty of Versailles, which could arguably be a lesser cause, as its formation was mostly resulting from the Great Depression. Then we will go on to talk about the many factors that contributed into the formation of German Nazism, including the role of the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles had not played a big role in the rise of Italian fascism. Instead, its rise is attributed to causes such as the fear of communism, a strong sense of nationalism, and dissatisfaction resulting from the depression that swept across Europe. However, bitterness from the Treaty of Versailles not promising Italy new territory also contributed to the rise. Not in great extent, though. So before we look at the causes that went into the rise of fascism, we need to look at some background on its foundation. So what is fascism? Fascism is an authoritarian form of government, in which the state holds total authority over the society and seeks to control all aspects of public and private life. Its goals are meant to glorify the state and give it total power. There is one leader and one party. In Italy's case, that would be Benito Mussolini and his party. The system allows for no opposition or protests, and this ideology is also intensely nationalistic, a key component here that differentiates it from communism. Some factors that led to the creation and rise of fascism include economic instability. During the 1930s, there was a worldwide economic depression known as the Great Depression, which started around 1929 for most countries, marked by the stock market crash in the US. The Great Depression hit Italy very hard. Financial crisis peaked in 1932 and major government intervention was the result. The Industrial Reconstruction Institute was formed in January of 1933 by the fascist regime, which then took control of the bank-owned companies. The IRI played a big role in the Italian economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s. As for Germany's economic instability, it was, in large part, a result of the Treaty of Versailles. This we will get into more detail later on. Fear of communism. Unlike the Soviet model of communism, fascism allowed free enterprise and private property, thus appealing to the business-oriented middle class, as this gave them economic security. Across Europe, there was a fear of communism and its spread, and Italy and Germany were no exceptions. Weak governments. Italy made a poor showing in the war, and government expenditure during the war was twice its spending for the previous period. As a result, Italy's economy was in crisis and the country was plagued with unemployment, inflation, riots, strikes, and much more. Germany, as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, fell into great debt. Its economy was practically ruined by this treaty and inflation rates were high in the country. The German population was furious that the government had agreed to sign this treaty, and the Weimar Republic did not do much to improve conditions within the country. Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles was intended to solve everything and ultimately create peace. However, it really satisfied no one. Italy and Germany, one a winner and the other a loser in the war, were both bitter about the Treaty of Versailles for different reasons. Italy had not received new territory as Britain and France promised it, and Germany, for obvious reasons, did not like the reparations that the treaty set upon it. These conditions gave rise to fascism. Now to answer the question, was Italian fascism a consequence of the Treaty of Versailles? Well, in large part, the effects of the treaty had not played a big role in the rise of fascism. However, the bitterness from the conditions of the treaty did contribute to Mussolini's justifications for a world war. Italy was disappointed to not have received new territory as they had hoped to gain from the war, and so this is a factor. Not a very major one, but it can be related to the subject. The Great Depression is arguably the greatest cause for the rise of fascism, as fascism was an extreme ideology that was appealing to the middle-class population in order to stabilize the economy. A fear of communism was also a reason why fascism grew to appeal to the public. Benito Mussolini himself was terrified of the spread of communism, as with most of the rest of the world. Fascism was created as an alternative to this ideology, which is far more aggressive, and because this ideology was nationalistic in nature, it glorified the state. The nationalism in this ideology convinced the public of its good, ultimately giving the state and its leader immense power. Back to the question. The Treaty of Versailles did not play a large part in the creation of Italian fascism, as other factors such as economic instability, the extensive fear of communism, and a weak government played much greater roles in the rise of Italian fascism. Although the Treaty of Versailles played a very important role in the rise of German Nazism, other factors contributed to this brewing ideology, such as anti-Semitism, the strong belief in a supreme race, and a hatred of the socialist-dominated republic, all of which were fundamental to Hitler's rise to power. Arguably, though, the Treaty of Versailles was a major cause for the rise of Nazism and can even be blamed for the start of World War II. After World War I, harsh reparations were put on Germany. Firstly, the War Guilt Clause, Article 231. By far the most controversial, especially to Germany. It put the entire responsibility and blame of the war on Germany. Secondly, it required Germany to pay the equivalent of 20 billion gold marks to the Allied powers for the cost of the war. Third, the German army was limited to only 100,000 men of all ranks. Fourth, ownership of large artillery pieces, tanks, or aircraft were not allowed for the German army. Fifth, no general staff was allowed. The purpose of the general staff was to plan for war. No general staff equals to no war plans. Sixth, the German Navy was limited to 6 cruisers, 2 old battleships, and some smaller ships for port duties, and submarines were completely forbidden. Seventh, the Allies were to occupy Rhineland for 15 years in an area called Demilitarized Zone. Germany was to pay for the cost of the Allied troops stationed in this area. Eighth, Germany lost a lot of its territory. Alsace-Lorraine was returned to France, parts of Germany that were occupied by Polish people were given to the new country of Poland, and all German overseas colonies were divided up and given to France, England, and in the Pacific to Japan. Some other major factors that gave rise to Nazism include the public's dislike of its government, anti-Semitism, and the belief in a supreme race. The public was furious that the Weimar Republic had accepted the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and as a result doomed the nation to a long-term debt. Besides being unable to cope with the reparations stated in the treaty, the Weimar Republic had not solved many of the economic troubles that the nation was enduring. Bringing on to the next point, racism. Adolf Hitler blamed the Jews and labeled them as the root cause for all of Germany's problems, and the public believed that. He was deeply dissatisfied because the Jews occupied high positions in German society. In the meantime, he became a convert to Nordicism, where he began to take pride in the German nation. He believed that the German defeat in World War I was due to the betrayal of socialists who had made the November Revolution, and so he hated the socialist-dominated republic. While he was imprisoned for trying to overthrow the Weimar Republic, he laid down the basic philosophies behind Nazism in his book Mein Kampf. So let's talk about what Nazism is. Nazi philosophy was based on Hitler's ideas, where he divided mankind into 2 groups, the Aryans and the non-Aryans. The Aryans were the master race, which he and the German population believed to be a part of, and the non-Aryans were the slave races. But to justify Germany's defeat in the First World War, Hitler had to find a scapegoat: the Jews. He said that the Jews were the most vicious of the slave races. They caused the German defeat by encouraging socialists to make the November Revolution in 1918. The following video shows Hitler giving a speech to the public explaining the importance of the Nazi Party by arguing the dominance of the supreme race.
Und weil dieser beste Rassenwert der deutschen Nation in einer stolzen Selbsteinschätzung mutig und kühn die Führung des Reiches und Volkes forderte, hat das Volk sich in immer größerer Zahl dieser Führung angeschlossen und unterstellt. Das deutsche Volk ist glücklich in dem Bewusstsein, dass die ewige Flucht der Erscheinungen nunmehr endgültig abgelöst wurde von einem ruhenden Pol. Der sich als Träger seines besten Blutes fühlen und dieses wissend zur Führung der Nation erhoben hat und entschlossen ist, diese Führung zu behalten, wahrzunehmen und nicht mehr abzugeben.
German racist thinkers embraced the ideas of Houston Stewart Chamberlain, an Englishman who was devoted to Germanism. In Foundations of the 19th Century, which was written by him in 1899, Chamberlain held that the struggle between races was the driving force of history, and Germans, who were descendants of ancient Aryans, were superior in culture. His racist and anti-Semitic views make him a spiritual forerunner of Nazism, and could be credited as the pathbreaker in Nazi philosophy. The role of the Führer was also greatly emphasized in this ideology. In Mein Kampf, Hitler convinces the Germans that if they wanted their nation to become the strong nation they were destined to be, they had to believe in the Führer, Hitler himself. Führer would exterminate the Jews so that they would not pollute the German blood, and the parliamentary government would be replaced by Nazi rule. The Nazis would supposedly nationalize the big business, provide employment for all workers, and overall try to make Germany economically self-sufficient. Most of all, the Nazi government also aimed to abolish the Treaty of Versailles, bring about the union of all Germans in a single German state known as Großdeutschland, and conquer Eastern Europe, to provide additional living space for future generations. So now that we know the factors that led to the formation of Nazism, let's discuss the question at hand here. Was German Nazism a consequence of the Treaty of Versailles? To a large extent, yes. The Treaty of Versailles left many Germans angered by its extreme demands. The harsh conditions set by the treaty left the nation's economy in shambles. Not only was the public furious of being burdened with full responsibility of the war, but the economy was put on stake just to recuperate for the losses of the war. Germany was humiliated as a result of this war, as they were required to shrink down their army, lose a vast amount of their territory, and were demanded an enormous sum of money to pay back the Allied powers. In many ways, the Treaty of Versailles paved the way to a Second World War because it had burdened Germany with its harsh conditions, so much as to build up their anger until Hitler took control and found the need for a world war to rebuild their power and prestige. On the other hand, the other factors that are mentioned before, racism and dissatisfaction with the Weimar Republic, also contributed greatly to why Nazism grew to become popular, as it appealed to nationalists who believed that the nation should become strong again. In essence, the Treaty of Versailles was a major cause for the rise of Nazism, but there were other factors that contributed to the rise of this extreme ideology.